Welcome everyone who's here. This is going to be a very simple procedure tonight. First of all, I'd like to remind you this is the reason we've called this meeting, the special call meeting for the purpose of invited wastewater treatment specialists to inform the council about compliance requirements and legal responsibility of our elected officials, city officials with regard to the Carthage wastewater treatment plant. The council may also vote on how to proceed with the memorandum of understanding that exists between the city and the county related to the disposal of waste and the Carthage wastewater treatment plant after the reports from the specialists. May I have the roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Watts.
Here.
Councilwoman Knappel.
Here.
Councilwoman Scott.
Here.
Councilman Ebel.
Here.
Councilman Patey.
Here.
Councilman Reese.
Here.
City Attorney Bass.
Here.
I'd like first to just present in general our specialists who are here tonight. This is Mr. Brett Ward, who is our MTAS, specialist on wastewater treatment plants, and has been kind enough to drive down from Knoxville to talk with us. Mr. Barry Salkin, who is used to work with TDEC as a compliance specialist.
Yes.
And is now a specialist in the area of wastewater treatment countrywide. He does a lot of, you can tell him more about that when you, our superintendent of the wastewater sewer treatment plant, Mr. Steve Key, and Mr. Ricky Brown, who's a longtime operator of the plant, probably knows more about that plant than any human in existence right now. And we're very pleased to have all of them. The procedure tonight will be each gentleman will come up and present information that we need to know for compliance, capacity, legality, everything we need to know, because we are the legal people. We don't have a board of directors. This is not private. This is a public utility. So it's up to us legally to protect this plant, and they'll explain more about it to us. So I would like to, if you would, Mr. Ward, would you please come and address us first? And I'm sorry, one more thing. After they've all presented, then as you'll see on the agenda, please hold your questions until everyone's had a chance to present, and then we'll take questions from the council about these things. And then after the council has had, I've asked Mayor Mason if he has himself or one representative to ask a question about the information that's presented, if you have some, if you need clarification for any of the information they presented. But this tonight is simply to present information to the council that we need legally and compliance-wise. Thank you.
Good evening. Good to be with you all again. My name's Brett Ward. I'm wastewater specialist with UTMTAS. A former plant operator as Ricky and Steve, but working with MTAS a little over 20 years now. Want to ask the council a question. Have you ever visited your water plant or your sewer plant? Yes. Good. Okay. Would encourage all of you to do that. It's very interesting what takes place with these facilities. They're part of your city's infrastructure, part of the very important foundation upon which we build cities. Was looking at your municipal audit for last year quickly today. The town has about $10 million invested in water and wastewater utilities. And this is about 3 times the value of all your other city assets. So there's a huge investment in infrastructure for providing these 2 foundation services for our cities. On the sewer side, the governing document that pretty much tells us what we have to do would be this one right here. I think you all have been sent a copy of it. It's got several pages. I know the mayor has one right here. Commonly referred to as an NPDES permit. So that's the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, sometimes called a NPDES permit. It's a long name, so it gets various abbreviations and acronyms. This is the document where the town and the state of Tennessee have this legal agreement. They say, Carthage, you may discharge, according to this permit, back into the Cumberland River. And there are lots of responsibilities in here. On the very first page, this permit is due to expire the end of February. So February 28th, this one's gone, and you're supposed to have a new one. As of right now, we haven't seen a draft of what the new one's going to be. And so, there's this little bit of concern about, will it stay like this, or will it get a lot more strict? Currently, for a mechanical plant, as you guys have, this is about as easy a permit as there is to meet. You're fortunate. You're a small community on a relatively large river. So the permit requirements are relatively easy. There are a couple of pages in here that list all the numeric limits. So these would be tests that Steve and Ricky do on a regular basis. Some of them every day, some of them 3 times a week, but it's over and over and over again. These are all the numeric limits. Again, the water coming in has to be treated, and the effluent that they test numerous times each day throughout the week has to meet all these numeric limits. There are also some narrative limits. On page 3, there's one that Steve has brought up to me. It says, there shall be no distinctive visible floating scum, oil, or other materials contained in the wastewater discharge, and the wastewater discharge must not cause an objectionable color contrast with the receiving stream. And this is an issue where we have a little bit of concern with the leachate because color is going through the plant. Now, this is not something that he's supposed to report on. It would be more a responsibility of TDEC to visit the plant and look at it. It's a visual, it's subjective. But that's, again, one of these issues that we're a bit concerned about. A couple of pages of monitoring procedures. Again, these are things that Steve and Ricky has to do every day. Specific instructions about the tests they do. 2 more pages about reporting. Again, when you do a test, you record all that information, and then you have to report back to TDEC. Instructions on how to do that. If there's a case of non-compliance, if one of their tests is too high to meet the numeric limits that are listed in here, then what do you do? So there are 3 pages of instructions to Steve and Ricky about what happens if there's a numeric violation. And that one also ends up with liabilities. 2 sections under liabilities, civil and criminal liability, and then liability under state law. Violating an NPDES permit can get you in real trouble. Usually it's just simple letters of violation. The inspector might be coming by more often. Things that the mayor would respond to in writing, or Steve and Ricky might have to respond to in writing. But it can go up from that. Significant violations over a period of time can cost you money in the case of a TDEC issued order. And in very extreme cases, people do go to jail. Now, that's rare, but it can happen. But these are just some of the things that are in your wastewater discharge permit. And so you guys being basically the board of directors of this little business, these are things that come back as part of your all's responsibilities. A second item we want to talk about was the capacity of your sewer plant to treat waste. So, I think you all have a copy of this form right here. It says Carthage Sewer Treatment Plant Capacity Worksheet.
This one. You print it out.
Well, looks like that right there. So in your permit, there's a specified capacity of 625,000 gallons per day. But if we go back and look at the design documents for the plant from 1978, it was designed for 500,000. I have a real question how it went from design of 500 to 625, particularly when there was a key part of the treatment unit that was taken out of the process. Average flow now is 400,000. So you're flowing, the sewage flowing through the plant's about 81% of design capacity. Now when it rains, things change. Your flow can go as high as 1.6 million, 4 times average, which puts you at 260% of design flow. So considerable hydraulic overload during times of rain. Another key capacity factor of your plant is what we refer to in the industry as biochemical oxygen demand, or the abbreviation BOD. This is the main sewer test. It's about the organic strength of the wastewater. And of course, it's the organics that, if you put them back into the Cumberland River, cause all sorts of bad things to happen in the river. Oxygen depletion, possible fish kills in the extreme. So BOD test is one of the main wastewater tests. The best I can tell, your plant was designed to treat about 800 pounds of BOD per day. And currently, it's getting in about 800 pounds of BOD per day. So it looks like it's about 100% capacity as far as BOD capacity. One of the real resources we have in the state for helping wastewater plants, but also industrial plants, is now a retired professor from University of Memphis, Larry Moore. Larry's got a simple activated sludge model. Larry has modeled the plant, and his prediction was, well, the real BOD capacity is probably about 1,100 pounds. So it doesn't sound as bad as it is, but still, we're getting pretty heavily loaded. The plant was not designed to remove ammonia, but it probably does remove some. There are a lot of factors about ammonia removal. When the flow is down low, less than 400,000, it's probably removing some. But when the flow is way high, up over 1 million, it's not going to be removing much ammonia. Phosphorus removal was never designed. We think about 4 pounds of phosphorus per day is going into the river. Metals removal, the plant will remove some metals, but we don't know. We just don't have the test data. We do know that the biosolids this land applied, the metals there are in good shape. They're not a problem there. Complex organics, we simply don't know. We don't have any test data, what's going in or what's coming out. The disinfection method at the plant is gas chlorine, and there are no disinfection issues, which is really good. In 2018, there were 5 violations, is that correct, of the plant's permit, and they all occurred during a period of mechanical breakdown. The repairs were made and hasn't been an issue since. But that's a very good compliance record. You know, your staff's doing a good job for you with the tools they've got to use. But some risk factors that I see relate to the capacity. The first is hydraulic overload. And most of this goes back to the stormwater inflow and the groundwater infiltration. This wastewater abbreviation we use of I&I. A second risk factor is this high BOD load. The BOD concentration coming into your plant is quite high for the amount of I&I that you've got. So I was just asking Steve if he would do some additional testing on the different streams that come into the plant. Where's this BOD coming from? There's too much coming in for the amount of I&I you've got. You know, your average BOD is about 250. But for the volume of I&I, my experience said it ought to be more like 150. Now, from the test data we've got, it's not coming from the leachate. The leachate BOD is not that high. It's generally always less than 100. Some other risk factors are just the condition of the plant itself. It's 41 years old. It was constructed principally of steel. So you put sewage and steel in 41 years and you got rust. And so there are some components that are getting quite rusty and need some maintenance. Another risk factor is the proximity to the river and riverbank erosion, that could result in some structures being at risk. Influent risks. Basically, this gets back to the BOD. Where's this BOD coming from? There's a lot coming in. Is it coming from South Carthage? Is it coming from one side of town or another side of town? It's one of those things we don't know, but we need to learn about. Some other concerns, briefly mentioned it about the leachate. The ammonia is a concern, the discoloration is a concern, and the hydraulic load is a concern. So, my conclusion, right at the bottom paragraph, adding a modest amount of ammonia load from leachate is probably going to be okay. But it's going to be one of those things that Steve and Ricky really need the capacity, particularly when it rains and flow goes up, to turn that off. The second page here has a lot of the details. I'm not going to take the time to go through those now unless there's some specific questions later on. Okay, Mayor?
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Mr. Barry Selke. Thank you very much. Again, if you have questions, hold them and we'll get them at the end here.
I'm going to try to not repeat anything he said. I'm going to embellish and go in some other areas. She gave you a brief introduction. I started out as an inspector for the state, doing water and wastewater. And then my last few years there was chief of enforcement for the state, where I took these inspections and decided who got penalties and corrective orders. And since I've been out of government, I've been doing this for the private sector around the country. Sometimes for the cities and utilities, and sometimes people that are downstream suing. Initially, I looked at the permit and the discharge reports, and nothing jumped out at me other than you are reaching capacity. And capacity can be measured lots of different ways, but if it's designed for 500,000 gallons a day, and you're running almost 500,000 gallons on a good day, you don't have room for much more. If the leachate coming in is similar to sewage, and you have the capacity hydraulically, it's generally not a problem. It's done all over the country. It shouldn't have any more effect than domestic wastewater. So I asked the operators to give me some data, and it's something changed. I'm going to give you some numbers that they gave me. In 2014 and 15, they didn't have volume of leachate. There was no record of that. In 2016, it was 900,000 gallons for the year. These are yearly totals. In 2017, it went to 1.23 million gallons. This is truckloads coming in added up. By 2018, it was over 3 million gallons. So the amount is going up. Generally, what that means is you're catching more water at the landfill, or it's gotten bigger, or something's changed there. If it's just water like rainfall coming in, it would probably mean you have a weaker strength waste that's being trucked over. If you just looked at the ammonia in 2014, the average ammonia was 8 milligrams per liter, also called parts per million. You don't really need to know what that means, just remember the number 8. 2015 it was 6. 2017 it was up to 30 milligrams per liter. For some reason we have no data in 2017. 2018 it was 161. That number jumped off the page at me. Typical domestic wastewater from households will have an ammonia of around 20 or 25 parts per million. This plant is not designed to treat out any ammonia because you're on a big river. And back in the 70s and 80s, permits on big rivers were not required to remove ammonia. They're gradually phasing in ammonia, nitrogen, and phosphorus across the country. So you'll probably be seeing that, if not this next permit, the one after. This plant cannot treat that level of ammonia. It's just going to pass through to the river. You're going to knock some down, but if it's not in the range of a typical sewage concentration, it's not going to get treated. So 161 is way over 20 or 25. The BOD range went from 0 to 42 up to 493 in the most recent year, which is well above normal sewage. It's variable. The average is 37. Now that's typical sewage treatment. That's actually weak for sewage. Sewage would be 150 to 250. The ammonia is a bigger problem. And then we have some chloride data. We don't have any until this past year, but the average was 684 parts per million, as high as 1,212. That's a lot of chloride. That's not something typically found in sewage, and it's not something this plant can take out. So any chloride being dumped in the plant is mostly just going to go straight into the river. So because of these numbers, both the volume going up and the concentrations, this would probably trigger an industrial user permit program. So the state requires any city that has industrial users, so they call it significant industrial users, SIU, to develop a pre-treatment program and then issue a permit from the city to each user. In small towns like this, you probably don't have any industry, and there's never been a need for one. This would trigger that, and I'll let Brett answer questions about it, but he develops those programs for cities and assists on it, and then you'll develop a permit that says you can discharge into us as long as it's no more than this amount and no more than this quality, which generally is going to be similar to what sewage quality is, which right now it's gotten well beyond that. And this plant basically is going to pass it through to the river. If the trends I'm seeing going from less than 1 million to over 3 million, and the numbers going, we don't have trends except on ammonia, going from 8 to 161, if that trend continues, you're going to start violating the city's permit because it can't treat this amount of waste. Okay, I'll let y'all
Thank you.
ask the operator questions or us.
Well, yes, let's get the operators and then we'll go to questions. Thank you very much.
Got some papers I think I'll pass out.
This is Mr. Steve Key again, our.
Yeah, I think
plant
everybody knows me.
supervisor.
I'm Steve Key. I'm the supervisor at the wastewater treatment plant. And also I carry the license for the collection system. And if y'all want to just take one of those and pass it. I had to, after the last meeting, I went back and thought I'd do a little research and had to look at kind of my responsibilities for the town of Carthage. And I'm not only responsible for being full regulatory compliance, but I have to protect the public health and the environment and the town's liabilities. And I'm responsible for the physical assets such as the plant infrastructure and for the future, not only my training, but also the plant expansions and capacities. And I've also got to be a good steward with the citizens' money. So I kind of looked at everything that was going on from my viewpoint. And one thing I was asked, several people, what's leachate look like? So I just took a picture at the plant of our normal sewer water, and I got a couple of pictures of leachate you're all welcome to look at just to give you a visual of it. As far as there's about 3 things I thought I needed to bring to the council just for information for y'all to take and research it, whatever you need to do with it. But as far as being a good steward with the citizens' money, I thought I needed to make sure, because we got some new council people. Our treatment plant, as is now, was constructed in 1978, so it's 41 years old. So then, in 2017, the town of Carthage received a grant for $1,592,000 for a water plant. Well, part of that they used to put in a system to get the backwash off of us at the plant, which was mud, grit, stuff we were getting And they thought if they got that off of us, it would help the treatment process, but also would help with the lifetime of the plant. And I asked the engineer what that cost was, and he said you was looking right at $500,000 that we had just spent. So I wanted to bring that forward to you. Preparing for the future, plant capacity and plant expansion. As Mr. Ward said, he come down and did some good work for us. We are close to capacity. And probably if the plant's 41-year-old, if we can get another 8 or 9 years out of it and get 50 years, we'll be probably pushing it pretty close. So we need to look at it, if we do this and it's a long-term thing, what's the financial impact on building a new plant? If it's built to treat the nitrogen ammonia, and what would the cost be also? Because if we treat it, we'll have it on our discharge permit. So going forward, that's something I think you need to look at. And the only other one I found, and I haven't heard anybody say anything about it, I just found this while I was looking because I've never worked at a landfill or dealt with it, was the post-closure. Now I'm assuming if this pipeline connects, they're planning on it being connected for the long haul. I don't know if it'd be 15 years, 20 years, what the lifetime of that is. But EPA regulation says that the required post-closure care is for 30 years after closure, and specific care requirements consist of maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of the leachate collection system. So I guess I wanted to bring that to you for you to research and see if that's something you wanted to look at going forward for another 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it may be. I don't have that answer. But that's basically what I had. The original discussion about piping the leachate into our system was in March of 2017. And at that time, the only consideration was that it would bring the leachate in at a slower pace and a more controlled pace, and I believe we all agreed to that. That would be a better thing. But after looking at the plant capacity now, rain's the big issue. I know when it rains, Johnny's probably got more leachate from runoff, and when it rains, we got more flow. So when he's needing to move it, we're shutting the valve. So I don't know if it's the best thing to work anyway. So we were running 1.8 million Sunday through the plant. So I think going forward it may not be the best idea either way because of the I&I. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Key. Mr. Brown.
I think Mr. Key.
You think, you're going to defer to Mr. Key? Did everybody get to look at this? Did everybody get to look at the picture? Okay. We've asked the council to hold their questions till now. Would you like to individually ask them and let them come up and answer? That might be the best way. Okay. Mr. Ward, if you would like to come up, and any questions we might have for you, and then Mr. Sulkin and Mr. Key.
There's Ward. I've got about a billion questions here.
A billion,
I
okay.
apologize. It's not
We'll
that
be here a
many,
long
but,
time.
yeah. Have you been able to speak with CTAS regarding the adding these requirements to our plant and how to do that with the leachate?
I have spoken briefly with the CTES landfill consultant who's back here on the second row. We have.
Okay. And if you all want me to stop, I'm not trying to hog questions. How many, basically, you're talking about how the penalties, as far as, is it typically fines, is it jail time? I mean, how often do you see cities getting fined? How often do you see people going to jail over these water violations in the time that you've worked here?
The very severe ones going to jail, it's not very often, but it does happen.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now, commissioner's orders or director's orders with fines attached, there's several throughout every year.
Can you give us an example of why, like, those times that they have it? Like, would it be something where they were purposefully dumping just awful stuff in the river, or was it something of negligence?
Individuals going to jail more often than not is falsification of records.
Okay, gotcha.
No.
So that was more
Now,
of a...
there's an infamous case of a Middle Tennessee father and son who both went to the federal pen for basically falsification of records.
Gotcha. Basically, what we're looking at is we're needing to extend our BOD capacity. Are we looking at, if we accept this leachate, it seems to me like I'm looking at these pictures that we're dumping quite a bit of it just all at once. And it looks pretty nasty when it's coming through. And you were talking about colors, and you were talking about high ammonia levels and things like that. But then you also had stated how we can treat some of these, but just not at high levels. If it was to trickle in, do you feel that we can treat it?
Well, that's the far better way. You know, a small 24/7, 365 type addition into the system. You know, it's far better than truckload lots that slug load the plant.
Yes, and for the record, I'm against this truckload dumping in. I think it's terrible. I think it's awful. I don't think we can handle it at all. But what I'm wondering is, we're looking at 3 to 4 gallons a minute and a shut off when it rains, like everyone here had said. When it rains, that seems to be where it's higher. Now it obviously dilutes it more, but us having that ability to shut off, also us having a higher pond, are we capable of being in compliance with this trickle system, with this shut off valve? Are we capable of being in compliance?
A lot of the time, I think yes.
What would be the examples of where we wouldn't be?
Go ahead.
At very high flow situations, when the plant's inundated with rainwater and groundwater, it's going to complicate that treatment. Or in a situation where there's extraordinarily high ammonia. So there are two different things that could impact the plant negative as I'm seeing them right now.
May I ask a question? Because I'm not clear about this. The capacity it was originally built for, you said, is 500,000, and we're already over that. Is that correct?
Your average in 2018 was 400,000. So, but there are times when you're 3 times capacity.
And how would we be able to control this if?
Like most municipal sewer systems in the state, the collection system, all those pipes that run throughout the whole town are old, sometimes deteriorated, sometimes dilapidated, and they leak. They leak. Groundwater leaks into them, stormwater leaks into them when they rain, and that's the real challenge. For almost every municipal sewer system is the rehabilitation that needs to be done on the collection system. If you can take all that rainwater out, you just bought yourself a whole lot of plant capacity.
And
now,
you mentioned,
that's easy to say, but hard to do.
I think you mentioned that it's built of steel. One of your
Bulk of your plant, the original bulk of the plant's
Right.
all steel construction.
So would we have to know what chemicals are coming through from the landfill to know how it would affect that steel, or how would we know this coming through? I guess is what I'm saying.
Barry brought up a good question about the chloride level. So you mix salt and steel, that accelerates any kind of rusting. Now, I don't know if their level of chloride would impact that or not. It would not be helpful for it, no.
So basically, just if I can and I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, but if it trickles in, you don't seem to be worried so much about if it's us being able to be able to treat it. It seems that we can treat it if it trickles in, except in the exception of a large rain, like the example this past few weeks. I mean, we've been well over capacity, and during that time, if we were able to stop that flow of leachate and it wasn't coming in, that would basically put us in compliance to be able to basically shut it off. And then when we get back down to where we're at that 81%, how you quoted, capacity, we would be able to treat that 2 to 3 gallons per minute.
Of course, 2 to 3 gallons per minute, that's just like 4,000 or 5,000 gallons a day. And I think they need to haul more than that, don't they?
I would have to ask, basically I'd have to ask them, but from what I was told by the county it was 2 to 3 gallons a minute trickling in instead of,
Ask them.
yeah.
Here.
So, if I have
Well-
permission to ask,
I think last time he said, didn't he, how many? Just,
He's doing some math right now.
It's closer to 8. It is, I think the number we were using before is ranging from 6 to 8 a day.
so 8 gallons, so 6 to 8, so let's
that's
put it at 8.
10,000 gallons a day then.
Yes, 10 to 12,000 gallons is where the needed requirement based on the leachate production.
But
What
you're
if-
pre-treating it before.
Yes.
We get it. Jim.
that's part of my question, because I don't think I heard from anyone, all of the things that have been coming in for a couple of years now. Was there any testing or pre-treatment of everything that's been coming on up to this point?
We have a little bit of test data, which is all we've got, which is what we're making big decisions on, limited test data. It would be nice to have some more test data, because, you know, we talked about ammonia, we talked about BOD, we talked about chlorides. If, as Barry said, this gets into a formal industrial pretreatment program, there'll be lots of testing. And there are a lot of things there that we just don't know about right now.
So up to this point, if I'm hearing you correctly, things may have gone through the plant and we don't know how it may have affected our lines or our plants or what we've
Best-
actually put into the river.
Best of our knowledge, it hasn't done harm, but we don't know.
Would we need to, because our permit's expiring at the end of February, would we have to get an industrial permit to accept this leachate, to be in compliance, to take that liability off of us?
Okay. The way industrial pretreatment permitting works in Tennessee is TDEC delegates or basically forces the cities to do that. So if the landfill is declared a significant industrial user using the EPA definition, Carthage needs a TDEC-approved industrial pretreatment program.
But as of now, it's not.
Right now, it's not.
Gotcha.
But
Does that mean
it's-
that the landfill would have to up their ante on the pretreatment, or how does that work?
well, it changes the role for Carthage. You become a regulator. You have to put the regulator hat on, and you have to issue the county a permit. And this does cost money, and most of the cost is in testing. And this could easily be a $5,000 to $10,000 a year additional cost, pretty much all in testing.
And we would absorb that cost, or they would?
You should pass it on to the customer who's causing you to incur that cost.
Okay.
Because it's not right for all these homeowners out here to subsidize another customer. And the same applies the other way.
Said they would accept
Right.
that cost.
Okay.
And do another.
And
Because you're gonna have 40 days of storage, is that right?
Currently, we have 42 days of storage at the facility.
But you're going to go to, were you building an extra pond, or was that it? Or were we stopped at 42
The
days?
state requires us to have a 30-day storage on
Okay.
site. We're at 42.
Gotcha.
Okay. Could we ask some more questions of our speakers, and then we'll get in? Do you have any?
Out of curiosity,
Yes, ma'am.
if our average capacity is at 81%, overflow days is at 260%, how does that compare to other municipalities in the state? I mean, are we way high, way low?
You're within the range of a lot of cities, yes ma'am. There are a lot that run on average far under 50%, but most every plant in the state when it rains is over capacity. But 260%, that's quite a bit over.
And would that simply be because of the age of the plant?
Well, mostly it's the age of the collection system and the deteriorated state of the collection system.
Mr. I mean, maybe hear some more from both of you, or?
Anyone else?
I got a
You know-
question.
Yes, sir.
Whether
the significant industrial user permit is classified and that category is named, we are essentially doing a de facto permit system like that if you do this, you're setting guideline and criteria for the county to dump the leachate into the city, correct? So you're giving them criteria they've got to meet, whether it's within the confines of this significant user in industry permit, or whether it's just what we're requiring if we go this route, right? It may be more complicated with the permit. I don't know.
I brought a draft permit that's kind of based on your current sewer use ordinance. You might call it industrial pretreatment light. You know, it's the goal is to achieve the same thing without the TDEC involvement. So
What triggers that?
now, as part of the new permit that you should receive before the end of February, there'll be a specific requirement in that new permit. Within 120 days of receipt of that permit, Steve's got to do an industrial user survey. And so that'll be real thorough ones. You look at all commercial businesses. But Carthage is small enough, you guys know what's going on. You don't know who's doing what generally. So it's the local decision. You know, you survey your businesses, your industries, your manufacturers, or big water users, and you make this decision. Are they a significant industrial user based on the EPA definition of significant industrial user? And if you decide the landfill is a significant industrial user, you're supposed to tell TDEC, and they'll say, Carthage, you need a pretreatment program. So, you know, Lebanon has them, Cookeville has them, Watertown has them. There are about 110 cities in the state that have the formal program. Now, Gordonsville over here operates kind of a pretreatment light. They've got some industry permitted, but they don't have the TDEC approved system. They kind of run it under the radar, but it works for them. Ricky?
Would you like to add anything? I mean, y'all add anything that you may have thought of? Yes, sir.
I was gonna just add something on the permit fixing to expire at the end of February. We got to get our information into the state 180 days before it expires. But we hadn't seen a draft yet. If you don't get your draft yet and you don't see nothing, you run off the old permit till you hear from them. I mean, the last time we renewed a permit, it took us 2 years to get a new one. So it's not like, hey, we're gonna shut the sewer plant down at the end of February. No. We're good till we hear from them. So you run off the old permit till you get your new one.
And generally they're good for 5 years. I mean, if it's issued on time, February the 28th of this year, it's good for 5 years. So we know we're set for 5 years, however that comes out. I better let Barry.
One of the questions, and I don't know if it's which one, but you can address it to both of you. I guess a concern that I have from the beginning is how we control, because we're responsible for whatever comes into the plant, if it's detrimental to the plant or the operators, and for whatever goes out. How can we be assured that we're controlling for this? I've never heard of any treatments. There's no tests coming. For 2 years, there have been no tests of the material coming in, so we don't know what we've been taking in, if it's been legal, not legal. We don't know what's been going out into the river because there's no testing for it. When do we start testing for this stuff so we know what we're being responsible for?
I think you've passed that point, and if I was still working at TDEC and I was aware of the situation and the growing volume and concentrations, I would instruct the city to treat it as an industrial user, a significant industrial user, and require the city to have a permit program. Because it's not like every other business in town. It's different. It's a step above that. So whether you put it on the application and they know to write that into the new permit, or not, I don't know if you put it in there, it should have been on the application.
Well, I guess I'm saying just us as a legal body, if we're responsible for what's coming in, but we don't know what's coming in as far as the chemical component or the ammonia or the chlorides or whatever, and it's been coming in 2 years that way and going out that way, I'm just concerned what we're doing.
I don't think anybody's gonna go back in time, because
No,
nothing's
but I'm
happened.
saying from now on,
But-
how do we make sure that we are abiding by the law?
Well, I think you
That's-
know enough now that there are questions that ought to be controlled with an industrial user permit, pre-treatment permit. I understand there's some pre-treatment going on, but it ought to be regulated so that as treatment takes place at the landfill, you know what quality it's treated to before you accept it. And there's an agreement. TDEC can regulate against either the city discharging to the river or go up the pipe and regulate any industry discharging into your system, as can downstream parties. Anybody that has an interest can go after both, and it does happen. You don't want to get in that situation. You're aware of this now. I would suggest that you treat it as a pretreatment program, whether you're ordered to or not, and I expect you will be under the new permit. And find out how much is coming in and how much is being pre-treated, because they may need to up the pre-treatment at the landfill. If they're aerating it, maybe they need more aeration. When the city can't handle the flow, more flow is being generated, so the 41 days may not be enough. And the city's supposed to
I'm sorry,
give...
41 days to hold it, is that what you're saying?
Right. The city's supposed to give full biological treatment to every drop that comes in. At high flows, you can't do that now. So you're already over the line as far as the plant capacity on rainy days. And TDEC's been lenient because you do have a big river and a weak permit, but that's liable to change when the permit is renewed.
So you're saying we will be more responsible for making sure testing is done before it comes in?
I think you should be more responsible for that, yes. If I was accepting it, I'd want to know the quality and make sure it's compatible with what you could treat.
But the county's gonna be doing all the testing, right? Y'all are gonna start doing more testing if
We
we
have
do
done
this?
preliminary tested that was requested.
Right.
So that data should be in.
Do we have results of those tests?
No, it's a 10-day turnaround on that test.
I think we've requested the tests several times, haven't we?
No, we just requested it.
No, Steve
For our
has.
meeting,
I didn't get them until they sent them to me,
yeah.
whenever they said send them to me.
Okay.
The testing requested was the testing related to the landfill permit, solid waste permit. I believe that data was provided for all of 2018.
That's my question too. My understanding is there's a totally different requirement for the landfill as to testing for what comes into the sewer. Is that
You're
correct?
talking about testing of the solid waste or testing of the leachate?
Of the leachate. Under the TDEC solid waste permit, there's a requirement that does not have a lot. I mean, I've talked to Brett about that. The additional testing that Brett requested was the testing that was performed last week. That had some 40 or 50 constituents in it that were tested, and that was everything that a wastewater treatment plant would test for. We don't have the results. They are not back from the laboratory.
So we still don't know what we're bringing in at this point then, if we don't have that test. Is that
Let me
correct?
address one other thing and I'll take a quick. It's true that if you have a slow trickle connection, it's less of an impact, doesn't shock the system. The reverse of that is that once you hard plumb it in there, it's harder to undo it if a problem develops. So you've made a huge investment, and then if the volume is such that you can't handle it, now you can't use that pipeline. So it's a plus and a minus. Go ahead.
And like you were saying with the trickle, I mean, we're looking at 10,000 gallons a day. We're looking at a 2% of our capacity in leachate, which is, I mean, it's a pretty significant number, but it's also still we can hold it back during that time. The three things that you spoke of that were concerning to you were the high levels of ammonia, the higher BOD numbers, and the chloride. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
With those numbers, is there something, in your opinion, that that the waste treatment plant can do to, or the waste treatment up there where they're treating the water, that they can do to bring those numbers down to more acceptable levels?
You mean at the landfill?
At the landfill, yeah. I apologize, I'm saying that wrong.
I think the short answer is yes. I don't know what they're already doing, but anytime you put leachate or any other wastewater in a pond and add air to it and create a population of organisms that consume it, like ammonia, it will bring it down in general, unless there's some sort of toxic effect.
At the last meeting, which apparently now was not a meeting, but anyway, it was discussed with the county that they would be working on building an additional pond. Is that one of the things that can help alleviate the problem?
Yes.
Okay.
Because if the city's gonna take it, and they say, we're gonna take this leachate at this volume and this quality, you're gonna have to get the quality and volume down, because on days when they can least afford to take it, you have the most to get rid of, you being the landfill. So something's gonna have to be done at the source.
Are there better guidelines that would help them to alleviate this problem or to test better or whatever?
Yeah, you're not the first city to go through this. It's very common. I would think that MTAS and the CTAS deals with this across the state. Across the country it happens, but I don't have a quick answer for you.
I have a question, and it refers back to something that Mr. Key said. It just hit me, that once we are connected and the landfill actually closes, those leachate ponds are still active or have to be maintained for 30 years. If we're connected to them, does that mean that we as a city are now responsible for the leachate?
I'm going to answer this cautiously. My understanding is the owner of the landfill will remain responsible, which is the county. The county's not going away. They'll still be the landowner and the source. So they'll be a responsible party as long as it's required under the post-closure. You become a secondary responsible party if you accept anybody's waste and then put it in the river through your permit. So you're both responsible.
So we will be responsible, the city, 30 years beyond the closure of the actual landfill, is that correct?
As long as you're accepting somebody's flow, you're responsible for what you do with it.
You would accept it if it closed, would you?
Well, once it's closed, doesn't mean that it doesn't get rained on.
So we
But the
still
county's
pay-
still paying for all of it. They're still paying for everything like they are now. The producers that
Right.
is liable,
You-
not.
If you go out there right now, you have closed areas, it's still getting rained on and water will soak in and generate some amount
Well,
of
so
leachate.
if it's closed, you turned off the valve at the
No, that's
connection.
not what they're saying.
No?
No,
We
it would
keep taking
still flow.
Well,
There'll be
but the
leachate
county's-
coming out for decades.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
that's, my next question is, who will then, if the landfill is closed, who's going to test that whatever is coming in is acceptable?
I think it'd
Well,
be
still the county.
It'd be the county. I mean, if the county's, I mean, I don't know if anything's disappearing, or county or city's going to disappear. I don't think no one's going to disappear. The landfill may disappear, but the liabilities with it still fall within the county, and the county would still have to adhere to the agreement
Is
that they
correct?
have with the
I don't-
city.
I don't know.
Generally, yes.
So
I mean,
someone-
someone could come along and say, I'm gonna build something on that property and assume that liability, but typically, it's the owner that closed it, is still the owner.
Absolutely.
Could address that well as well.
So, okay.
We're probably getting into some deeper weeds than we
I
are
just didn't
prepared to
think
talk.
about
And
that
there are
till you
folks at
mentioned it.
TDEC that regulate post-closure programs. This is not new or unique to your city.
I want to address kind of what you said right before I asked that question, was about if, once we put a hard line in, it's harder to undo, which I agree with. That being that it's a hard line, though, if we were to expand that capacity, because we're going to grow one day, we're going to want to expand capacity. Like he was saying, we might have 7 years left on it. It's built for 500, it's 625. We're making our assumptions off of 500K capacity. That being said, if we moved it to somewhere else or we had a different plant, obviously it would operate off of that same system, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you're already at capacity based on what I've seen, because you have to account for rainy days. And on rainy weekends, you're not able to handle what you're getting right now. If it's going up that high and you're having to not give everything full treatment. So going forward, if you want to hard plumb it in, I would say that you have to expand with that in mind. And the county or any other industry can be a partner to that. A lot of times in these small towns, a major industry will help fund the expansion and make sure the capacity is there.
Well, and I do have a concern that it's like, if we're, I like the idea of the pipeline, but I don't want the landfill to become a new industry either. It's there, it has to be there. I don't know anyone who likes the landfill, it's just there. But I also don't want to basically say, well, let's, and I guess that would be a county issue, let's expand this, let's get more counties trash, let's keep growing this landfill out, because at that point, then we look at capacity levels, and so like if we need to basically say, and this would maybe keep the county in check, we could basically say, well, we'll accept up to this amount of leachate, and when it gets to that point, we can't accept any more than that, and that would basically put a stop to the county trying to expand growth of the landfill, if that makes sense. Just kind of
Cap,
looking
so
over.
to speak, for
Yeah,
the-
put a cap on how much
Makes sense.
leachate we can get per day, and I don't see any issues the county doing
But
something.
you
like that.
can do that, but if they don't stop generating it, it's gotta go somewhere. And the
But
numbers
we
show,
have control of turn it
but
off.
you're just gonna back it up. And
Well, then
it's-
they got to find a way. Then the county would have to find a way to get rid of it if they did, basically.
Yeah, the numbers have already grown significantly. And one other thing you said made me think of something else. The landfill is a public service just like the sewage treatment plant is. So it's not a bad thing. It's part of domestic life in this
Yeah,
town. But if you start bringing in things to the landfill, particularly from outside, and some towns bring in outside garbage because they get paid by the ton, or they bring in industrial waste from some other community that doesn't want it, that changes the balance. It's no longer a local service that you're providing. It is an industry.
Yeah.
And
I think it is somewhat. That basically because we as a county, it breaks even, or we actually I think we make money on the landfill, which I like that business model, but also too. I don't want it to become a business. I want it to be just enough of a business so that it offsets our cost, and that's it. And I think if we put that cap on it, that would basically encourage the county not to put it as a business.
I have a question, just reflecting on what you just said. Mr. Lee or whoever, what percentage would you say of our landfill is local trash as opposed to other things coming in from the outside?
About 50%.
50% comes from other counties.
Yeah.
Is it a significant amount of money that we're making off of that?
I'm sorry.
Is it a significant amount of money that we are making off of bringing that in?
No, it's enough to fund the landfill and the 6 convenience sites. That's the reason the general public's able to go to the citizens of Smith County can go to convenience sites. You don't get charged to dump your trash because the landfill takes trash from other counties to fund it. It is sorted trash. There's no hazardous waste or nothing like that. We got inspection sheets. We go through them. At the minimum, I think what we're taking in is 3 loads a day we have to inspect. The state makes us inspect so many percent a day. We can inspect every load that comes in there if we want to, but we require to inspect 3 loads a day.
How much increased leachate volume do you think comes from that extra 50%?
So, I guess to clarify, on a landfill, there is a closure portion of it, and that's an active piece of the landfill. You continually close off cells of your landfill. You are making them 100% impermeable. There is no leachate production once we close off a cell. So currently, Smith County is obligated under TDEC to close approximately 25% next year of the landfill. That is a reduction, basically it's a 1-to-1. How much land I have and how much rain falls on that land is how much I generate of leachate. So when we close 25% of the landfill, we are reducing our generation of leachate by about 25%. Now that may be 20% depending on how the slopes and everything work out, but there's a continual process that goes on where you are closing them. The closure has a plastic HDPE liner that's a 60 mil liner that goes across that is protecting it from allowing any rain to fall in there. So on the final closure of the landfill, the leachate production rapidly goes down. Typically by the 30-year closure period, you don't have leachate coming out of your system. Some do have 1 to 3% of leachate coming out, but that's just draining the inside cell. You're basically burritoing your whole landfill in plastic at the end of the closure. We do that periodically as part of, we reach final grade and it's time to close off that cell to eliminate the amount of leachate that we're producing.
May I ask about, I know the very first cell there did not have a liner under it. How have you dealt with that to prevent this?
It has a liner on top of it that was permitted after the subtitle D went into effect. So we have a old landfill cell that is underneath it. And on top of that, the state, in order to bring that landfill up even higher, which was a part of something they did in the 90s, I believe, the state did require that to be lined. So right now, the old unlined landfill that you're referring to is capped. There is no new water being introduced into that. And it is below the groundwater surface elevation as well, so there's no introduction of water from the groundwater.
You mean above the groundwater elevation?
Yeah, above the groundwater elevation.
And do we have any records going back, I don't know how far, if any special waste was ever brought in there from other outside sources?
After Subtitle D, we are required to get special waste permits for anything other than municipal trash or Class 3 trash, which is debris and brush, Class 3.
Do we know over the years if anything has been brought in, like from East Tennessee, special waste, aluminum filings or anything like that?
You're talking about in the old class one?
Or anything, anywhere, because things have
We
changed.
do have, I know, Johnny, you can speak to the special waste.
We take waste from the water treatment plants, we take it from, Hartsville, we take it from Watertown, that all falls under approved permit from TDEC. For sludge, that's what we're taking in.
I guess I'm referring like farther back, are there records, for instance, if trucks came from East Tennessee with aluminum?
Aluminum dross, no, there's no
No.
aluminum dross in the landfill.
There's nothing on record that I've seen, but you're speaking on a cell that was opened in 1988. I was born in 1982, so
Yeah,
that's
there you go.
before my
Right,
time.
right. If we needed to see those records, who would have those?
Because it wasn't regulated at the time, they're not available. I mean,
But
there
more
is a-
recently, there's no special waste other than the water treatment plant. Do you have any idea why can I ask questions?
Sure.
Good. Why the leachate quality has changed and volume in the last 3 years?
I just come on in January, and I just got to looking at the water samples. Me and Steve Steve actually brought it to my attention that the ammonia was high in it. I was the operator there. I had just come on as a director in January 24th of last year.
So
And
the volume piece that you're referring to, the uppers, was because the landfill has grown and it was not capped as it should have been. There is no requirement to cap it, but because we had so much open landfill space, recently there has been an agreement with TDEC to begin the closure process. So the increase in volume was the open working surface that was being done. That has been taken down by about, I guess it was 2.5 years ago. There was a violation given to the landfill for too large of a working face. We had too much open space. So the volume increase was related to the open space.
But the volume increases in the past year.
Last year, again, it's from the large working face that was there that has now been eliminated down to approximately half acre.
yeah, less than that.
And then the other side of your question, the ammonia change, was notified by the plant, and that's when they started pre-treatment. The ammonia actually had a spike mid-year last year. The last quarter of data that's been available from the consultant, the report that we published, the milligrams, so we talked about the 8 milligrams I think they referenced. In 724 it was 83.3, 831 it was 12.3, 928 it was 65.9. We are still dialing in our ammonia, but that is a far reduction from what it was at the 250, I think 250 to 300 in that range. We continually up our pre-treatment based on the water coming in. As you guys know from wastewater, you got to dial the things in, and that's currently what the county is doing to keep that ammonia to a level that can be handled at the treatment plant.
So, but I guess to repeat, do we know what caused that spike? What was coming in to cause that spike in ammonia?
No, we don't. I mean, it's a part of it's not unusual to have ammonia spikes in landfills.
How about chloride? Any clue where that's coming from?
No, chloride we haven't been notified by anybody that chloride was an issue with the plant till tonight. So we'll have to investigate what exactly the chloride is and the constituents and start looking at pre-treatment options. As Brett has offered to the county, there is a permit, a draft permit, not, I don't want to call it a draft because it's just a sample permit, I guess is a better word. And that is what the county's been working through to develop and understand those requirements and what additional pre-treatment has been made. But to kind of reiterate, the chloride was never brought to the county's attention until tonight.
Is that in part because there actually has been no testing of what's coming from the perspective of the wastewater plant, what's needed to be tested for to come in? So we've never actually done that until recently. Is that correct?
The testing for chloride has not been performed recently. It has not been a problem at the other two plants beyond Carthage that this wastewater has been disposed at. So it's not been risen as an issue until tonight.
The reason I ask about special waste is I remember probably some of us several years ago, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, TDEC came in because some gentleman had cows that were drinking downstream from the landfill and apparently got sick and died, one of them. So they brought in, I think it was TDEC that came in and made some special arrangements for what had to be done at the landfill. I just remember the news reports about it, but I don't know the specifics, and that's why I was asking if there are any records of what
To
came
my
in.
knowledge, TDEC has never done that. Everybody, the TDEC data viewer holds all inspections, reports, violations, it's all public record. I've reviewed the public record and have never seen a violation related to leachate leaving the site and entering the stream and killing cows.
Well, no, it wasn't leachate, it was the groundwater that was coming out. I
remember hearing about that, and I looked at the records too.
I don't know.
I saw a report of leachate on this two phases in 2016 that the inspectors found. But I also remember when the expansion was going on, there were reports about some dead cows, but I don't know any details of those.
Okay, that was
Do
Mr.
we
Quarles, I
know,
think.
do we know which side of the landfill the cows was on when they died?
Well, it was down, the creek, the creek that's downhill
Behind the
there,
landfill.
where the old farm used to be down there. Yeah,
So you're talking about on the old Wright farm?
right. Yes, sir, that's right.
Can I ask Steve a quick question? You had mentioned that grant for the it was the grant for the water treatment plant. What was the year? I couldn't catch that when you said it earlier.
I think they were doing the construction in 2017. I know that the grit system went online February of 2018.
2017. Okay, that's what I thought.
And,
I did want to ask it for permission if we could give it's Kim Ray. Ray, did I say that correctly?
Close enough.
Just a county perspective too. That would.
Well, Mayor Mason and I talked about this earlier. He has the right to have one person more or less question what we've heard tonight. If you have some confusion about what they've heard.
Do you mind if I finish my question to you?
Well, yes, sir. But I mean, that's the agreement. Is what I was telling you.
Okay. Well, my question to you was if we could have her speak for maybe 5 minutes up here, just the way these gentlemen did, and then be able to ask questions of her as well.
Yeah, that was not what this was called for, so we're getting into sticky territory again. It was to hear for our legal liability and compliance. So if you want to go over into that territory again, we're doing what we did last time.
I'm asking your permission for it. I mean,
I think that's not, if you're possibly leading to a vote about this memorandum of understanding and extending it during this interim period of time, you've got to hear enough information from both sides to make an intelligent decision about making the vote. So implicit in that would be hearing from whatever resources here you want to hear from.
We'll be glad to do that. I thought in the last meeting we did cover quite a bit of that. But ma'am, would you like to come up for a minute?
They're okay with it.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'll first say Brett's my colleague. We work together under the same roof, same building, even in Knoxville, for UT's Institute for Public Service. We're here for the citizens of the state of Tennessee. We're not here specifically on the behalf of any one entity, as much as we're trying to say there's ways to make these things work. They work in Tennessee, across the state. Relationships between cities and counties are important, and usually you win a little bit more if you try to make those things amicable and mutually beneficial. So with that said, the engineers have done a great job talking about the the parameters of the sampling at the landfill. You don't have to sample the same way at a landfill. You are required to do quarterly sampling of leachate. It's not a daily thing. Leachate changes over time. It's very much reflective in the age of the landfill, the amount of dilution. There's a whole host of parameters that influence that. So you're looking at a snapshot of the leachate component over a year's time. So obviously if there becomes a relationship between the treatment plant and the landfill, what you would want to do is have that metered and in some way tested with more frequency, obviously. So it sounds like there's a way to move that all forward. I will say it's very common in Tennessee for leachate to be treated at municipal treatment plants. The industrial permit, as we're speaking about, may be the right way to go. Other than that, I guess the other part about water quality, I think it is true that over time we're going to have to look at the way leachate is put into these systems. So the state's looking at that, the landfills have to look at that, but the landfill is also an asset for Smith County. It's not just a liability. So it's important to look at that as a way that everybody, Carthage, Gordonsville, and the county residents are not having to pay for landfill disposal right now. So you start adding all these environmental compliance items onto that, and you'll have to back it out somewhere else. So where you can have these cooperative arrangements between the city and the county, you might actually end up with a better deal for your citizens.
I have a question, too, actually, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying, and I think this came up at the last meeting. If we do continue to accept the leachate into our system, and it gets mixed in with the biological things that we're collecting, and something were to go out into the Cumberland River that violates EPA or whatever, how do we know who's responsible for that?
Well, the way, say, take Blount County up where I am in East Tennessee, the relationship between Alcoa and the landfill folks is that they do test with some regularity to make sure that it's something that the system operators are comfortable with. They meter that, and quite frankly, there's a fee in exchange for the city taking that water on.
But my question is, my understanding is once it comes through our plant, it's our legal liability if we put something out. No matter if you came from you or from someone else, it's our liability if something comes in.
It doesn't get exchanged to you from the landfill. The landfill still has an obligation to. They're under the RCRA regulations, which are federal regulations on closing a landfill, opening cells, erosion and sediment control. They have a whole host of regulatory frameworks that they are responsible for too. But so they're not passing a liability on to the city.
Okay, but I guess my basic question is, once it's mixed in, there's no way to differentiate between what you've brought in and our biological. It's all mixed together. So if it goes out into the Cumberland River because it goes through our plant, is it not our liability? I don't know.
If we had...
Maybe ask these people, please.
That's why the industrial pretreatment program with the testing required sounds to be more like a better and better idea.
Okay.
Scott County discharges leachate to the city of Oneida under an industrial pretreatment permit. The city cuts them off every now and then, particularly in really cold weather. Roane County, same thing. Dyersburg takes leachate, all under industrial pretreatment.
Okay.
And there's testing. So we test them frequently and we know what's there.
And may I just, one comment on that too, is that when you have this force main or line to, what untreated leachate is what the environmental concern is. So in that case, what when the engineers and the state put together the plan for maintaining that landfill, what they're trying to do is to prevent the groundwater from being contaminated. It needs to be treated correctly, which is via a water waste treatment plant.
To go back then to Mr. Key's remark, when there are high rains and we are already at capacity in the plant, if we were to be connected, he would have to do the shutoff valve. How would you upstream make sure that that doesn't keep coming? Is there a cutoff valve at your end also? Can that happen?
That can be as part of the design,
And do we have control over that?
Well, you would have a more spelled out memorandum of understanding between the city and the county on how these things happen. What would happen if there was, some sort of way that didn't work? That would be written into that as you all now becoming a regulator of that industrial discharge.
And would we be able, where would we best take samples if we do pre-treat? Is it at the line itself or at the leachate?
You've got various options. You can test it exactly where it comes into your system. I think going back to the landfill to the ponds is a better way of testing.
Do you have something to say?
To clarify, the design would have two shutoffs that would be inserted. There would be a valve out at your connection on your property that you can shut off at any time. The pipeline that comes into that is all paid for by Smith County. Then also, the easier way that would make everybody happy is it'd be a phone call and we would shut the pumps off. I mean, that's the best way to do it is shut the pumps off. But there would be a valve that we wouldn't have access to. It would be on the Carthage's right away, right next to their manhole that could manually be shut off. But ideally, there would be a coordination between the county and the city to say, hey, we're expected, how I look at this is you're gonna have to do a discharge to rain ratio. When it rains a half an inch or an inch or whatever the magic number is that puts you into that situation, we would look at the rainstorms and understand there is a rain gauge at the site that Johnny has to record every day. And once we hit that rain gauge, Johnny would know automatically to shut it off. I mean, that's kind of how we would plan, but we gave you the option to also have a manual valve that you could turn off.
So if this were to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning and your
I
alarm...
was gonna say, usually our biggest rains will be at 7 o'clock Friday night, 1 o'clock Saturday morning, midnight Sunday morning. It never happens while you're at work, So that's why a lot of times I get a high wet well alarm. I have to call Ricky. We have to go make sure we don't have to pump down. We're out in the rain doing this. So we go to the plant, flow's high. I call Johnny, somebody got to go to the landfill. We got to go shut the valve. Pre-treatment program. What I'm getting to, hey, whatever y'all decide to do, we respect that. There's two of us. We're running a sewer plant, we're running 5 lift stations, and you're gonna put a pre-treatment program plus all this other. I may come to you, need another employee. I'm just saying, we may have to have help.
And I believe we had discussed at the prior meeting that the county would be willing to take on some of that additional costs, and that would be provided for in the contract if it does come to that, of needing additional
Yeah,
staff.
like I say, and me and Ricky, we respect whatever else have to do, but just knowing like Friday night, 6:45 is when I got the high wet well alarm. As of Sunday, we still have 1.8 million coming into the plant. I mean, and that was my point. I didn't want the county to get tied up $400,000, $500,000 in something, and then we got it shut off 30-40% of the time, and they say, this just ain't working. But I'm gonna be held to the same permit compliance that they are. I can't be letting it come to the plant if I can't treat it. So, I mean, that's what I wanted to bring to their attention.
It would be cellular, so Johnny would have the access to do it via internet to shut off the pumps.
We'll be doing the pre-treatment on our side. You would be doing that.
Well, Mr. Key, that's raised an interesting point. If we can't take in over our capacity, and that is running 40 or 50% of the time, that means that you won't have access to that 40 or 50% of the time. Is that acceptable on your end?
That's where your 40 day.
Where's that number coming
supply
from?
comes in at.
Yeah, for 180 days, you're gonna be over compliance. You're gonna be out of compliance.
I don't know, he's just...
Well, in 2018,
Based on the weather.
yeah, it's based on the weather, we don't know.
You don't know?
Usually the wet weather months, which was 7 months last winter, where we can't haul to the field, the ground's saturated, Today, we were still 900,000 gallons. If it rains again tomorrow, we don't know. You know, that's the thing, but I don't want you to go top a lot of money and then all of a sudden say, well, we can't send it because they keep shutting the valve. I wanted to make sure that we weren't butting heads when you need to send it, I'm shutting the valve.
So if the county can provide us with discharge records, we'd be happy to model it and provide you with an understanding, because we have all the rainfall data from last year. We would have your discharge data, and we'd be glad to evaluate how many days we would actually get used based on the wettest year. I mean, that was the second wettest, 2018 was the second wettest on record. We would also want to go back to some of our, we'd probably look at a 10-year or 15-year average to understand how many days were actually in use. So if we had discharge data, we could correlate when your system becomes upset.
And that's what I'm wondering is if that other pond that we're looking at building up there, if we can use that based on that data as far as rainfall goes, because in these extreme circumstances, we would look at we say, well, we do have capacity. If we have a really wet year, we do have capacity to shut it off. And is that something that the county would be willing to?
I mean, just so we all know, that is a huge investment when you're talking about building an additional pond. That is more significant than building the force main in there. Because it is a regulated pond, it would be a lined pond. Just as was spoken about, the groundwater protection is very big on landfill. We would want to model and understand it. If we had a relationship between rainfall and discharge, and he would know that, hey, if I get a 3/4 of an inch of rain over a 10-hour period, I'm going to be down for 2 or 3 days. We'd want to know that data going into it, and if it was required, we would build another pond to have that capacity. There would be no problem, but we wouldn't want to have a substantial investment of building a pond to find out that pond remains dry all the time.
We got 42,
Yeah.
41 or 42 days
So we-
supply already.
The discharge data would help us understand how many days we would get used out of the system. Right now, as it currently, the average flow going in is 12,500 gallons per day. And there's been many days throughout the 2018 that the landfill has not taken any water there, including, every Sunday just about, and no water comes out of there.
So let's just say we got 42 days right now. Yeah, we put another pond in. Let's just be conservative on it. Say it's 50% more. So we're looking at 60 something days where they could hold it for 60 days. I mean, I feel like that's.
I just want them to know, if I have to close it, I gotta close it, and I didn't want them to come back and say, well, we spent all this money and we can't use it. I just wanted that up front, because me and Ricky's gotta stay in compliance, just like they do.
It's my understanding that you've got that right to do that, what we've been discussing.
Yeah, and we will, and I just didn't want them to get into a point where they're spending all this money, and then saying, oh, well, they've shut the valve, and it's 8 days later, it's still closed. Well, it's because we're still doing 900,000 a day because of the I&I. And it happens, we're at the mercy of the weather.
Something that, and I guess probably everybody knows this, but I didn't know it going in, is that a lot of the flow coming through the plant is simply because we have these leaky lines all over the place, and the water's coming literally through the ground into our lines, putting us over capacity. So as long as we have these old leaky
I'll give you an
50,
example.
60-year-old
Friday,
lines.
we were a little over 400,000, I think, Friday. And Friday night, we got the rain, we got 1 inch. And then Saturday, we got another 1.1 inch. So Sunday, we had 1.8 million coming in. Monday, we had 1.2 million. Today, we had 900,000. Tomorrow, we're probably gonna be 700,000. If it rains again, we're gonna go back over 1 million. That's just we got an old plant, and we do what we can with what we got.
And to me, it is an old plant, and I think we're asking an awful lot of it from just what we're doing right now. It's sort of, we're not like Hartsville, where they are built to take care of industrial waste. We're an old plant that was built to do biological waste.
I've got a question for Kim. If the pre-treat, do you feel that we need more pre-treatment at the landfill site to treat basically those higher levels that we got of ammonia, of the BOD and the chloride?
I think that since those were just snapshots, it would require a little bit more testing before I would comment that that's a given.
Yeah.
The pretreatment on site is not uncommon, and, you know, it's something that has to be with this in mind, would be evaluated beyond what the state requires, which is the quarterly evaluation. You would look at that in the context of, you know, assisting the wastewater treatment plant in meeting their obligations. So I think there could be more pretreatment options that can get, you know, evaluated.
Some of you who haven't had a chance to ask questions, you have anything? Is anything else that would be pertinent from y'all's point of view?
I'd like to make a motion that we hold off making a decision till the next meeting, so that way we can talk with our constituents about, I know that they probably watch this, they probably listen to this, and then at the next meeting, we can make a decision and feel a little bit more informed and get the public a little more informed, so.
Well, just to back up a little bit, I'm not sure, because of a procedural error that happened the last time around, the vote that we had about whether to proceed with the MOU or not, we do have to go back and rethink that.
Tentatively, I think we go into discussion, we get a second and then go into discussion on.
But is that what you're saying? I'm not clear what you're saying.
My motion is that we adjourn, basically, my motion is that we adjourn, and the reason I'd like to motion to
Okay.
adjourn is that we be able to go speak with our constituents and hear what they have to say.
So,
Can we do what we had said we were gonna do in the last meeting where we gave them to March to,
Yeah, I mean.
like we're basically leaving the
continue.
MOU
we need
to
to
continue and then tabling
Okay,
it. We said table it to March, so the
A
attorneys
table to
could.
March, yeah.
okay,
Could get
then
together.
I need to ask you to make, well, no, I need to first make that motion again. Let's vote one way or the other on that,
Okay.
because we have to redo that motion.
So I guess I guess if we're gonna redo the motion, so motion to table this as before till March, that way we can speak with our constituents, hear what their thoughts are on the project, and
Well,
then
no, I'm sorry.
make our,
Let me back up again. We voted last time you made the motion and was voted on to, not to cancel the MOU, but to continue it till March.
so that would still stand, so
Well,
I
no,
guess.
no, we have to, you have to revote that. That was done in error last time, so we
Okay.
have to readdress that.
Okay,
if
so
you wanna make that
I'll make the
again,
motion to continue the agreement with the county until the March meeting.
the MOU.
The MOU until the March meeting.
And what that would be the first Thursday in March. Do we have a date on that? Okay.
So motion's on the table.
Okay, wait a minute. The motion is
Continue with the MOU.
to
as it
to
stands until
continue
March.
with the MOU between the county and the city
March
regarding the
7th.
landfill and the wastewater treatment plant until March 7th.
7th.
Do I hear a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on that?
And they're gonna have the, draft documents, is that right?
Contract.
Yeah, and
Well,
that-
did-
Contacts
Well,
on it.
well, no, this is just to redo that motion, then we'll go to the next one if you have another one. Okay.
That was just discussion, so.
No, it's just whether or not to continue the MOU, so any other discussion about whether or not? Okay, could I have a roll call vote, please, on this?
Vice Mayor Watts.
Yes.
Councilwoman Knappel.
Yes.
Councilwoman Scott.
Yes.